I stood in front of the mirror, watching my sister run her fingers through her newly cut hair, the exact same length as mine, the exact same style I'd worn for 3 years. "It looks better on me, don't you think?" Lily asked, not even looking at me as she admired herself. "Mum says I have the face for it." I said nothing. What was there to say? This wasn't the first time. The sweater I'd saved for months to buy, she got it in 3 colours the next week. The art style I developed through years of practice, she copied it and got praised for being naturally talented. Even the small cafe I'd discovered and made my sanctuary, she started bringing her friends there until it became hers. But the hair felt different. It felt like she'd finally taken the last thing that was mine. Each snip of the scissors had happened earlier that afternoon, and I'd heard them from my room. The metallic sound had echoed through the walls like small deaths, each one severing not just hair but the last thread of identity I'd thought I could claim. I'd pressed my hands over my ears, but the sound had continued anyway, relentless and final. When she'd emerged from the bathroom, triumphant and glowing, I'd felt something inside me crumble so quietly that no one else heard it fall. "Emily, stop being so dramatic," my mother said from the doorway. "It's just hair. You don't own a hairstyle." Just hair. Just a sweater. Just a cafe. Just my art style. Just my dreams. Just my existence, parcelled out and redistributed until there was nothing left that couldn't be replicated, improved upon, or stolen entirely. I watched Lily smile at her reflection, watched my mother smile at Lily, and felt something inside me go very quiet and very still. It was the kind of quiet that comes after years of screaming into voids, the kind of stillness that follows the final collapse of hope. I recognised it even then, though I didn't have a name for it yet. It was the sound of surrender wearing the mask of peace. That night, Daniel came over. We'd been together for 2 years, and I'd learned to read the spaces between his words, the way his eyes would drift when I talked about my art, the way he'd check his phone when I shared my dreams. "I need to tell you something," he said, and I already knew. I'd known for weeks, really, the way he'd started asking about Lily. Casual questions that felt like fishing lines cast into deep water. "How's your sister doing?" "Lily seems really creative." "Does she always dress like that?" I'd watched the hook sink deeper with each question, felt the tug of inevitability pulling me under, and said nothing. Because what could I say? That I saw it coming? That I'd always known I was a placeholder, a practice run for the real thing? That even the man who claimed to love me couldn't help but look past me to see if there was a better version nearby? "I think I have feelings for Lily," he said, and at least he had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I didn't mean for it to happen, but she's like me, but better," I finished for him. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, familiar and bitter. How many times had I completed this sentence in my head? How many variations had I rehearsed in the dark hours before dawn, preparing for this exact moment? He didn't deny it. That was the worst part. Not the confession itself, but the absence of denial, the implicit agreement that yes, his feelings made perfect sense, that anyone would make the same choice given the option. "She's more confident, Emily, more alive. You're always so quiet, so in your own head. Lily she shines." I thought about telling him that Lily shined because she reflected everyone else's light, that her confidence came from never having to build anything herself, only take what others had already built. I thought about explaining that being in my own head wasn't a flaw, but a survival mechanism, that I'd learnt to live there because the outside world had made it clear there was no room for me in it. But I was tired, so tired. The exhaustion wasn't physical. It was something deeper, something that had been accumulating for years like sediment at the bottom of a lake. Each small theft, each casual dismissal, each moment of being overlooked had added another layer until the weight of it all pressed down on my chest, making each breath a conscious effort, each heartbeat a deliberate choice to continue. Okay, I said. Okay? He looked surprised, maybe even disappointed. Perhaps he'd wanted me to fight, to give him a story he could tell where I was the difficult one, where my unreasonableness justified his betrayal. Perhaps he'd wanted the drama of a breakup he could recount at parties, painting himself as the victim of my excessive emotion or unreasonable demands. Okay, I repeated. You should go. After he left, I cut my hair myself. Not because I was angry, but because I needed to feel something change, needed to take control of something, anything. I stood in front of the same mirror where Lily had admired herself hours before and cut until my hair fell in uneven chunks around my shoulders. The scissors were dull, meant for paper, not hair, and they tore as much as they cut. Each strand resisted before giving way, and I felt a savage satisfaction in the destruction. If Lily wanted my hairstyle, she could have this version too. Jagged, uneven, uneven, ruined. Let her copy this. Let her try to make this look better. My reflection became increasingly unfamiliar as I worked, the girl in the mirror transforming into someone I didn't recognize. Or perhaps I was finally seeing myself as others saw me, damaged, lesser, wrong. The hair fell in pieces at my feet, dark strands mixing with the white tile like calligraphy on snow, writing a message I couldn't read. My mother found me there at 3 a.m, hair scattered on the bathroom floor like autumn leaves. "What have you done?" she whispered, horrified. She wasn't asking what I'd done to my hair. She was asking what I'd done to her narrative, to the comfortable story where I was the quiet one who never caused trouble, who always made things easier by making myself smaller. I'd violated the unspoken contract. I could be unhappy, but I couldn't make my unhappiness visible. "Just hair," I said, using her own words. "I don't own a hairstyle, remember?" She looked at me like I was a stranger, and I realised that's what I'd always been to her. A stranger who happened to live in her house, sharing space with the daughter she actually wanted. She'd given birth to me, raised me, fed me, clothed me, but she'd never actually seen me. I was the supporting character in Lily's story, the shadow that made her light seem brighter, the rough draft that made her final version seem more polished. The next few weeks passed in a blur of forced family dinners, where Lily and Daniel would exchange glances they thought were subtle, where my parents would ask Lily about her day and forget to ask about mine, where I slowly disappeared into the background of my own life. I started staying out later, walking the city streets, until my feet ached. The night air became my companion, cool and indifferent, treating me with the same neutral disregard as everything else, but at least being honest about it. I'd stand on bridges and watch the water move beneath me, thinking about how easy it would be to just let go, to finally stop trying to matter in a world that had decided I didn't. The city, at night, had a different rhythm, a lonelier pulse. I'd watch lit windows pass by and imagine the lives inside them, families eating dinner together, couples laughing over wine, friends gathered around tables. Normal lives. Lives where people mattered to each other, where presence was acknowledged, where existence registered as something more than an inconvenience or an opportunity for comparison. On one of these walks, I found myself standing on the railing of a bridge I'd crossed 100 times. Not because I'd planned it, not because I'd decided anything, but because my body was tired of carrying the weight of being perpetually second best. The metal was cold under my hands, shocking against my skin even through the mild evening air. I'd climbed up without thinking, without making a conscious choice, my body moving on autopilot toward an ending it had been rehearsing for months. Below me, the water moved in patterns I couldn't predict, dark and somehow inviting in its mystery. The water looked peaceful in the moonlight. I thought about Lily wearing my hairstyle to family dinner, laughing with Daniel about something I'd once said that apparently became funny when she repeated it. I thought about my mother's eyes sliding past me to rest on her, the way someone might look past a smudged window to see the view beyond. I thought about my father, who'd stopped seeing me years ago, who looked through me like I was made of glass, transparent, fragile, and utterly unremarkable. I thought about how no one would really miss me. They'd miss the idea of me, maybe. The role I played as the comparison that made Lily shine brighter, but me, Emily, the person who dreamed in colours she couldn't name and who found magic in ordinary moments, that person had been invisible for so long that her absence wouldn't leave a shadow. The thought wasn't bitter anymore. It had moved beyond bitterness into something cleaner, simpler. It was just a fact, like gravity or the colour of the sky. I was unnecessary. My absence would create a brief ripple that would smooth over quickly, leaving the surface of their lives unmarked. The water called to me in a language that felt like peace. I let go. The fall was longer than I expected. Long enough to regret everything. Long enough to want to take it back. Long enough to realise that I didn't want to die. I just wanted to stop hurting. But it was too late. Time stretched in the space between the railing and the water, expanding impossibly. I had time to think how stupid this was, how permanent, how I'd confused the desire for change with the desire for ending. I had time to realise that what I'd wanted wasn't death, but transformation, not absence, but presence, not ending, but beginning. I had time to regret every moment I'd spent making myself smaller, every word I'd swallowed, every dream I'd dismissed as too ambitious for someone like me. I had time to mourn not the life I was leaving, but the life I'd never tried to live, the version of myself I'd been too afraid to become. The cold hit me first, then the impact. The water filled my lungs as I sank, and my last thought was a simple one. I wish I'd been brave enough to live instead of being brave enough to die. Then nothing. Then everything. I opened my eyes to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window, falling across my childhood desk where my art supplies sat exactly as they had 3 years ago. 3 years. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding as I looked at my hands. Younger hands, smoother hands. Hands that hadn't spent months developing calluses from holding brushes too tight because art was the only thing that made me feel real. The sunlight felt different than it should have. Or perhaps I felt different in it. It was the same quality of light I'd woken to 1,000 times before, but now it seemed to carry weight, significance. Each dust mote floating in its beam was a miracle I'd nearly never seen again. The warmth on my skin was a gift I'd rejected and been given back anyway. I was 17 again. The realization settled over me like snow, quiet and transforming. I had been given something impossible, a second chance. Not to change what others did, but to change how I let it shape me. My mind was a strange landscape, 17-year-old reality overlaid with 20-year-old memory, past and present occupying the same space, like a double-exposed photograph. I knew what would happen. I knew every small cruelty coming, every betrayal, every moment of invisibility. But more importantly, I knew how I'd contributed to my own erasure, how I'd handed over the pen and let others write my story. I got out of bed and walked to the mirror. My hair was long, falling past my shoulders in the same style I'd worn for years in my first life. The same style Lily would eventually copy. But this time, I knew better. This time, I knew that every choice I'd made to be smaller, to take up less space, to hand over pieces of myself for approval that never came, those choices had been mine. And this time, I could choose differently. The mirror showed me a girl I remembered being, but had never truly been. Young, uncertain, already learning to make herself invisible. But behind her eyes was something the first Emily hadn't possessed. Knowledge, understanding, the hard-won wisdom that comes from losing everything, including yourself. I didn't need to fight Lily. I didn't need to compete with her or resent her. I just needed to stop giving her the power to define me. The door burst open without a knock. Lily's signature entrance. "Emily, can I borrow your—" She stopped, looking at me with that calculating expression I now recognise so clearly. "What are you doing?" "Looking at myself," I said calmly. The words came out different than they would have before. Not defensive, not apologetic, not small, just factual. Yes, I was looking at myself. Yes, that was a complete and sufficient activity requiring no justification. Weird. She walked to my closet, helping herself to my things like she always did, like I'd always let her do. "No," I said. The word hung in the air between us, simple and immovable. I watched Lily's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and the first hints of uncertainty. This wasn't how the script went. I'd forgotten my lines, or rather, I'd learned new ones. She turned, a sweater in her hands, the one I'd bought last month, the one she'd worn a dozen times in my first life until it stopped feeling like mine. "What?" "You can't borrow that." Her eyes widened with shock and something else, uncertainty. She wasn't used to me saying no. None of them were. In the ecosystem of our family, I'd established myself as the one who gave, who yielded, who accommodated. Changing that role threatened the entire balance they'd constructed. "Don't be selfish, Emily. It's just a sweater." "Then buy your own," I said, taking it from her hands gently but firmly. "This one is mine." She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language, then huffed and left, slamming the door behind her. I heard her immediately go to our mother, her voice carrying through the walls. "Emily's being mean to me." The accusation was predictable, but hearing it still stung. Not because I felt guilty, I didn't, but because I recognised the mechanism, the way my boundary was immediately reframed as aggression, the way protecting my own things became meanness in their narrative. I folded the sweater and put it back in my closet, feeling something unfamiliar bloom in my chest. Self-respect. My mother knocked, which told me how unusual this situation was, and entered with her concerned parent face, the one she reserved for mediating between Lily and me, which always somehow ended with me being asked to be the bigger person. "Emily, your sister says you wouldn't let her borrow your sweater." "That's correct," I said. The formality of my response seemed to throw her off balance. She'd expected excuses or apologies, defensiveness or guilt. Instead, I'd given her simple confirmation, as if refusing to lend my clothes was a reasonable and unremarkable position, which, of course, it was. "Don't you think you're being a bit selfish? Lily just wanted to—" "Mum," I interrupted gently, "when was the last time Lily let me borrow something of hers?" My mother opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I could see her mind working, searching for an example, finding none. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of years of unexamined patterns. "That's different. Lily has expensive taste, and you have to be more careful with her things." "So, my things are less valuable? Less worth protecting?" I kept my voice soft, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. I wasn't trying to attack her or prove her wrong. I was simply asking her to examine the logic she'd been operating under, to hold it up to the light and see how it looked when stated plainly. "That's not what I meant. I'm not saying no to hurt Lily," I said, keeping my voice calm and even. "I'm saying no because these are my things, and I want to keep them for myself. That's not selfish, that's just normal." My mother looked at me like she'd never seen me before, and I realised she probably hadn't. She'd seen the quiet daughter who never caused problems, who always yielded, who made her life easier by making herself smaller. But she'd never really seen me. She'd never had to because I'd never demanded to be seen. "We'll discuss this later," she said finally, and left, but we never did discuss it. Because I didn't bring it up again, and she didn't want to confront the uncomfortable realization that she'd been treating her daughters with scales that were never balanced. The weeks passed, and I kept making small changes. When Lily tried to take credit for my ideas at family dinners, I calmly corrected her. When my parents forgot to ask about my day, I told them anyway. When Daniel, not yet my boyfriend in this timeline, started showing interest in me, I paid attention to the way he asked about Lily, the way his eyes followed her. And I made a different choice. Each small decision felt like reclaiming territory I'd previously ceded. The corrections at dinner, delivered without anger or hurt, just patient persistence. The volunteering of my own experiences, without waiting for permission or prompting. The careful observation of Daniel's attention patterns, noting the way his interest in me seemed contingent, provisional, dependent on factors I couldn't control. I don't think we should date, I told him when he asked me out, 3 months earlier than he had in my first life. What? Why? He looked genuinely confused, as if my agreeing to date him had been a foregone conclusion. Because I don't think you really see me, I said. I think you see someone you can be comfortable with while you wait for someone more exciting to come along. His face flushed. It's okay, I said and meant it. I'm not angry, but I know what I want now, and it's not someone who sees me as a safe bet. The conversation had a surreal quality. In my first life, I'd spent 2 years with this person, given him pieces of myself I had thought were precious, built a future in my mind that had always been fiction. Now, I was declining the invitation before it had even begun, saving both of us years of slow disappointment. He left looking confused and a little offended, and I felt nothing but relief. 6 months into my second life, Lily came home with a decision. I'm cutting my hair, she announced at dinner. Short, like that actress everyone's obsessed with. It'll look amazing on me. I kept eating, saying nothing. The food tasted better now, somehow. Or perhaps I was simply present enough to taste it, not lost in the spiraling thoughts of inadequacy that had accompanied every meal in my first life. Emily, you should do it too, my mother suggested. You could both have matching hair. Wouldn't that be sweet? In my first life, I'd already had short hair by this point. Lily had copied me after seeing how much attention it got me, the only time something of mine had been deemed worth taking, and I'd felt violated and erased. But this time was different. I'm actually thinking of doing something else with mine, I said casually. Oh? What? Lily asked, suddenly interested. I'm going to dye it blue. The silence at the table was profound. It wasn't just quiet. It was the kind of silence that follows a statement so unexpected it requires mental recalibration. I could see them all processing, trying to reconcile this declaration with the Emily they thought they knew, the one who never drew attention, who never made waves, who existed in shades of beige and grey. Blue? My mother sounded faint. Emily, that's so extreme. Why would you do something like that? Because I want to, I said simply. Because I think it'll look beautiful and it'll make me happy. But it's so attention-seeking, Lily said, and I heard the unspoken concern beneath her words. If you do something that bold, how will I stand out? Maybe I want attention, I said, looking directly at her. Maybe I'm tired of being invisible. The words carried weight I hadn't intended, or perhaps weight I'd intended but hadn't, consciously acknowledged. Tired wasn't strong enough, exhausted, depleted, done. I was done being invisible, done accommodating, done shrinking to make others more comfortable. You're not invisible, my father said, speaking up for the first time, looking uncomfortable. Aren't I? I asked gently. When was the last time you asked me about my art, Dad? Or Mum, when did you last remember that I prefer tea to coffee, even though you always remember Lily takes hers with 2 sugars? They stared at me, and I saw something shift in their faces, the first crack in their comfortable narrative. I wasn't being cruel or accusatory. I was simply stating facts, holding up a mirror to patterns they preferred not to examine. I'm not saying this to hurt you, I continued, but I'm done making myself smaller so everyone else can feel bigger. I'm dyeing my hair blue because I want to, and because it's mine to do with what I want. Lily cut her hair short the next week. It did look good on her. She was beautiful. That had never been the question. But without me having the same style, without that comparison to make her version better, it was just a haircut. I waited 2 weeks, building anticipation, before I went to the salon. The waiting was intentional, letting the idea settle, letting my family adjust to the concept of Emily doing something bold, something permanent, something that couldn't be undone or ignored. The stylist looked skeptical when I showed her the shade I wanted, electric blue, bright and unapologetic. "You're sure?" she asked. "This is a big change." "I'm sure," I said. I'd never been more certain of anything. This wasn't impulsive or reactionary. This was deliberate, intentional, mine. Every moment of waiting had reinforced my certainty. Every doubtful look from my family had strengthened my resolve. The process took hours. Bleaching, toning, dyeing. I sat in that chair and watched myself transform. Watched the quiet girl with the forgettable brown hair disappear and someone new emerge. The bleaching stung my scalp, a physical discomfort that felt somehow cleansing. The chemicals had a sharp smell that made my eyes water. The stylist worked methodically, section by section, and I watched in the mirror as my hair went from brown to orange to yellow to white blonde. Each stage was strange, unfamiliar, not quite right. But I trusted the process, understood that transformation required passing through stages that were neither the beginning nor the end. When it was done, I looked like myself for the first time in either of my lives. The blue was striking against my skin, made my eyes look brighter, made me impossible to overlook. But more than that, it was mine. Completely, utterly, undeniably mine. Lily couldn't copy this without looking like she was copying me. She couldn't make it better or claim it as her idea. I walked home slowly, watching people's reactions. Strangers smiled at me, complimented my courage. A little. Girl told her mother she wanted blue hair too. An old woman said I reminded her of the ocean. I felt visible. The sensation was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. After years of cultivating invisibility, of moving through the world like a ghost, being seen felt overwhelming. Eyes followed me. Heads turned. People noticed. And instead of shrinking from that attention as I once would have, I let myself inhabit it. Let myself take up the space my visibility created. When I walked through the front door, my family was having dinner. The conversation stopped the moment they saw me. "Oh my God," Lily whispered. My mother just stared, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth, forgotten. My father blinked several times, as if trying to reconcile this vibrant stranger with his quiet daughter. "What do you think?" I asked, running my fingers through my blue hair. "It's..." My mother searched for words. "It's certainly noticeable." "It's amazing," my father said suddenly, surprising everyone, including himself. "Emily, you look happy." I smiled at him, a real smile. "I am happy." The words were true in a way few things had been true in my first life. Happy wasn't quite right. It was too simple for the complex mix of emotions I felt. But there was joy in there, and pride, and satisfaction, and most importantly, there was presence. I was here. I was visible. I was real. Lily pushed her chair back from the table. I have homework," she mumbled and practically ran upstairs. I sat down at my place, serving myself dinner, and felt the weight of my family's attention in a way I never had before. Not because I'd made myself smaller to fit their expectations, but because I'd made myself bigger, and they had no choice but to see me. The next few months were transformative. My art, which I'd always hidden away, started going up on my walls. I joined the art club at school and found people who saw the world in colours and shapes like I did. I stopped going to the café that Lily had claimed and found a new one, a tiny place with mismatched furniture and an owner who learned my name and my order. I built a life that was mine. Each decision reinforced the next. The art on my walls attracted comments from friends who visited, which led to conversations about technique and vision, which led to me sharing more work, which led to connections with other artists. The art club became a sanctuary where my contributions were valued, where my perspective was sought out, where I wasn't anyone's sister or anyone's comparison, but simply Emily, the artist with interesting ideas about colour theory. The new cafe became a ritual, a place where I was known and welcomed. The owner, an elderly woman named Ruth, started having my tea ready when I walked in, learned that I preferred the corner table with the best light, remembered small details about my life that my own family forgot. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and old books, and its walls were covered in local art, including, eventually, some of mine. Lily struggled with my transformation more than I'd expected. She tried dyeing her hair, red first, then purple, but it never looked quite right on her, and she eventually went back to natural. She tried joining the art club, but quit after 2 sessions when she realised talent couldn't be borrowed like a sweater. I watched her floundering with something like pity. Not cruel satisfaction, but genuine sadness for someone who'd never learnt to be herself because she'd always been able to be a better version of someone else. The red hair had been too brassy against her skin tone. The purple had faded quickly to an unflattering grey. I'd said nothing, offered no advice, but I'd watched her struggle with the reality that bold choices required maintenance and commitment, that you couldn't just adopt someone else's rebellion and expect it to fit. One night, 6 months after I'd dyed my hair, I found Lily in the bathroom, crying in front of the mirror. I stood in the doorway, remembering my own breakdown in front of this same mirror in my first life. The symmetry was almost poetic, both of us breaking down in the same space, in front of the same glass, but for opposite reasons. I'd shattered because I'd had nothing of my own. She was shattering because she was realising the same thing. "What's wrong?" I asked quietly. "I don't know who I am," she sobbed. "Everyone keeps asking me what makes me different, what I'm passionate about, and I don't know, Emily. I've always just been better at things than other people. But you're so completely yourself now, and everyone sees it, and I realised I don't have that. I don't have anything that's just mine." I sat down next to her on the bathroom floor, the way I'd wished someone had sat with me. The tile was cold beneath me, hard and uncomfortable, but I stayed anyway. This moment mattered. "You can find it," I said, "but you have to stop looking at what other people have and start looking at what you want." "How did you do it?" she asked. "How did you just change?" I almost told her the truth about the bridge, about the water, about dying and coming back. But instead, I said, "I stopped waiting for permission to take up space." She looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time. Her eyes were red from crying, her face blotchy, her expression raw and vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. Without the armour of confidence and borrowed shine, she looked younger, uncertain, almost afraid. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for taking your things, for copying you, for everything." "I know," I said, and I did, because I understood now that Lily had been afraid too, afraid that, without borrowing other people's identities, she had none of her own. "Can we start over?" she asked. "We don't need to start over," I said. "We just need to start being honest." My parents changed too slowly. My mother started asking about my art, actually listening to my answers. My father joined me at my new cafe one Saturday, and we talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. They were learning to see me, and in seeing me, they were learning to see Lily differently too, not as the golden child, but as a person who also needed guidance and boundaries. The conversations with my father were revelatory. He told me about his own father, who'd never noticed him either, who'd favoured his brother the same way. He'd learned the pattern and repeated it without thinking, without examining, without questioning. The recognition in his eyes when he realised what he'd done was painful to witness, but necessary. We both cried that day in the café, quietly, over cooling tea. The day Daniel transferred to our school, a year later than he'd appeared in my first life, I was ready. He noticed me immediately, the girl with blue hair who laughed loudly with her art club friends, who walked through the halls like she belonged there. "Hi," he said, approaching me after class. "I'm Daniel, I just transferred." "Emily," I said, shaking his hand. "Your hair is incredible," he said. "Did it hurt? The bleaching?" "A little," I admitted. "But worth it." We talked for 20 minutes, and I watched him the entire time. Watched where his eyes went, where his attention stayed, and it stayed on me. Not looking for someone better, not waiting for someone more exciting, just present. His attention felt different than it had in my first life, or perhaps I felt different in receiving it. I wasn't desperate for validation, wasn't trying to earn his interest or prove my worth. I was simply being myself, and if that wasn't enough for him, then he wasn't right for me. The shift in my own internal stance changed everything. When Lily walked by, beautiful Lily, with her natural hair and borrowed confidence, Daniel barely glanced at her. "So," he said, pulling his attention back to me, "would you want to get coffee sometime? I'd love to see your art." I smiled. "I'd like that." We dated for 3 months before I was sure. Sure that he saw me, sure that he chose me not because I was convenient, but because he genuinely liked who I was. Sure that this time there would be no quiet moments of regret, no wondering if I was just the safe option. The relationship unfolded naturally, without the desperate edge my first attempt had carried. We went to galleries and talked about composition. We spent hours in my cafe, and he actually listened when I explained my artistic process. He asked questions and remembered the answers. He met me in the fullness of who I was, not the absence of who I wasn't. On a Saturday afternoon, we were at my cafe that I discovered and claimed and made mine, when Lily came in with her new friend group. She'd found her own people, finally, kids from her drama class who appreciated her performance talents. She discovered she loved acting, loved becoming other characters through scripts rather than stealing them from real people. She saw me and smiled, a real smile, and waved. I waved back. Daniel looked between us, curious. "You two seem good now." "We are," I said. "We're learning." "Learning what?" "How to be sisters without one of us disappearing." Later that evening, I found myself in front of the mirror again. The same mirror that had witnessed both my breakdown and Lily's, the same mirror that had reflected my brown hair, my poorly self-cut hair, and now my blue hair. But this time, I wasn't looking at my reflection, wondering if I was enough. I was looking at myself and knowing that I was. The blue had faded slightly, becoming softer, more lived in. The roots were starting to show, a reminder that bold choices required maintenance, that transformation was ongoing rather than singular. I'd need to re-dye it soon. Or maybe I'd try green. Or maybe I'd go back to natural. The point wasn't the colour, it was the choice. It was knowing that whatever I decided would be mine, made for me, by me. Lily appeared in the doorway, hesitating in a way she never used to, asking for permission to enter with her posture, if not her words. "Come in," I said. She stood next to me, both of us looking at our reflections. We looked nothing alike now. Her natural beauty next to my intentional vibrancy. And somehow, that made us more like sisters than we'd ever been when we were trying to look the same. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "The blue?" I thought about the bridge, about the water. about the girl I'd been who thought disappearing was the only way to stop hurting. I thought about the girl I was now who'd learned that being seen started with seeing yourself. "Not for a single moment," I said. She smiled, sad and genuine. "I regret the haircut. Not because it looked bad, but because I did it for the wrong reasons. I was trying to be you instead of being me. And now? Now I'm trying to figure out who me is," she said. "It's harder than I thought." "It is," I agreed, "but worth it to shut." We stood there together, two sisters who'd finally learned that they didn't need to be the same to matter, didn't need to compete to have value. "Your hair really is beautiful," Lily said softly. "I thought about copying it, right after you did it. But then I realised it wouldn't look like me. It looks like you. And that's what makes it beautiful." I hugged her then, and she hugged me back, and we both cried a little, mourning the years we'd wasted in competition and comparison. Her arms felt unfamiliar around me, and I realised we'd rarely hugged before, had rarely been physically affectionate when we weren't performing for our parents. This embrace was real, awkward and genuine and healing. When we pulled apart, my mother was standing in the hallway, watching us with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry, Emily. I didn't see you and should have. I made you invisible in your own home, and that's unforgivable." "It's not unforgivable," I said, "but it hurt." "I know," she whispered. "I see that now. I see you now." "Good," I said simply. "Because I'm not going anywhere." My father joined us, and for the first time in either of my lives, we had a family moment that felt real and whole, where everyone was present and seen. We stood in the hallway outside the bathroom, an unlikely congregation, and something shifted. Not fixed. Fixing would take time, but shifted. The first real movement toward health. That night I stood on my balcony, looking at the city lights and thinking about the bridge, about how close I'd come to never having this moment, these moments, this life. My phone buzzed. Daniel asking if I wanted to go to an art gallery opening tomorrow. My calendar had a reminder about the art club's exhibition next week. My blue hair caught the light from my room, electric and alive. I'd died once because I thought being invisible was the same as not existing. But I'd learned something in my second chance. I'd been making myself invisible. I'd been the one choosing to fade, choosing to shrink, choosing to hand over my identity piece by piece. The bridge was still there, I knew. The water still flowed beneath it. But I would never stand on that railing again. Because now I knew what I hadn't known then. Being visible wasn't about making others see you. It was about seeing yourself clearly enough that you became impossible to ignore. The blue hair had been a symbol, but the real change had been internal. It had been the quiet no to Lily, the honest conversation with Daniel, the boundaries with my parents, the art on my walls, the café I'd claimed, the space I'd finally allowed myself to take up. I heard Lily moving around in her room, probably working on the monologue for her drama class audition. I heard my parents talking softly downstairs, their voices carrying a warmth that had been absent before. I heard the city breathing around me, full of other people finding their own ways to be seen. And I realised something profound. I didn't hate my first life anymore, because without it, without the pain and the invisibility and the final, desperate act on that bridge, I wouldn't have understood how precious this second chance was. I wouldn't have had the courage to choose differently. Some people are born knowing their worth, but I'd had to die to discover mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. I touched my blue hair, running my fingers through it the way Lily had run her fingers through her copied haircut in my first life. But this time, the gesture was one of appreciation, not appropriation. This time, the reflection in the window showed someone who belonged to herself, Lily never did dye her hair blue. She found her own colours, her own stage, her own spotlight. My mother learned to see both her daughters clearly. My father learned to be present. Daniel and I built something real and honest, and I learned that rebirth isn't about changing others. It's about changing yourself. It's about looking in the mirror and recognizing the person looking back. It's about having the courage to take up space, to be loud, to be bright, to be undeniably, unapologetically yourself. The blue was just hair in the end, just dye and chemicals and a choice. But it was my choice, my blue, my visibility, my life. And when Lily saw her own reflection, she no longer saw someone who needed to be me to matter. She saw someone who could be herself. That was the real rebirth, not mine alone but ours. A family learning to see each other, sisters learning to exist without erasure, a girl learning that the opposite of invisible isn't just visible, it's present, authentic, whole. I never told anyone about the bridge, about my first life, about the second chance. How could I? Who would believe it? But sometimes when I passed by that bridge, I would stop. I would look at the water that had once been my ending and was now just water, just a river flowing through a city where I was building a life worth living. And I would think, thank you. Thank you for the fall. Thank you for the cold. Thank you for the moment of regret that taught me the difference between wanting to die and wanting to stop hurting. Thank you for the impossible second chance. Thank you for teaching me that the only person who could make me visible was me. The water would flow on, indifferent and eternal, and I would walk away blue-haired and certain toward a life that was finally, fully, wonderfully mine. Lily never regretted the mirror itself. She regretted what she'd seen in it. The emptiness of a reflection that was always borrowed, never original. The hollowness of beauty that was only beautiful in comparison. But now, when we both looked in the mirror, we saw ourselves. Different, distinct, and equally valuable. And that was worth every choice, every change, every moment of courage it took to get there. I was Emily, the girl with blue hair, the artist, the café regular, the daughter who was finally seen, the sister who was finally whole, the girl who had died and been reborn, not into a different life but into herself, and I'd never been more alive.